So, Professor Scholes, we've just had a debate on financial innovation. Why do you think it's so useful for economic growth?
Let's argue we've had a financial crisis and we've had a collapse of the financial system. We know in economics that innovation must lead infrastructure. And innovation must lead infrastructure because if we waited and built all the infrastructure necessary to support each possible successful innovation, we'd go broke. So basically what happens is that innovation must lead infrastructure, and therefore sometimes it goes too fast and infrastructure lags and we have blow-ups. Sometimes, and people make a lot of money because there's not controls or understanding of what's happening. And sometimes innovation is, infrastructure is too fast. There's too much infrastructure in place. So I think that I will admit that there has been a lot, there's an issue of too much leverage, as we've seen today, and then maybe that leverage has been facilitated by financial contracts. We have to go to a higher level question and say, why was there too much leverage? You know, why were the consumers borrowing so much against their human capital using credit cards? Or why did they have automobile loans as they did? Or why did individuals want to have housing loans? And why did we change the world from being a milk cow world to a beef cow world, where basically in the old days, you know, people had to have enough income to support their house and they had to have a down payment, enough milk to pay for it at each period of time, pay down the mortgage. All of a sudden we switched to a world in which, forget about the milk, we're going to go into the beef cow business. And this happened not only in the US, but it also happened in the UK, etc. So basically that fundamental question has to be answered. And why is it that the world changed where we took more risk? It wasn't derivatives that took more risk. That was only a tool to allow us to take more risk, or other leverage forms such as mortgages, etc. So that question, if we answer that question, maybe we'll have an understanding of more of why this crisis occurred and what regulations we might put forward in the future. We have to sit back as a society and ask these fundamental questions and not just give up on it and saying that's what's going to happen. Let's turn it on its head and think about a new road system that's going to create a whole different change in how we regulate. I tend to think the best regulatory system is one in Europe, your football, which is that you have broad rules like convertible debt into equity, that the bank, no stable value products unless they're 100% in bonds, government bonds, so you can't have fake alphas and fake returns, okay? And that we think of a regulatory system that's self-directional, and then if you violate those rules, as in a football field, you get the red card or whatever it is, you're off, okay? But meanwhile, on the field, competition is going on, it's dynamic. US football is exactly the opposite. You line up for 2 seconds of chaos, and there's 75,000 rules of how you move and
the ball is
no one is. So I think the future really has to be to say, let's use this opportunity because shock can create change.
Would you say there should be any restrictions on financial innovation, or do you think it's just down to the market to sort it out?
Well, if it were my druthers, I would let the market sort it out, because the market is much stronger at figuring things out than someone who's hired necessarily as a regulator, because obviously the pay of a regulator, everything else being equal, is much less. Now, I agree, I know what I would do. For example, you would put capital requirements or speed limits on the road to get around the fact that if everyone speeds, there's externalities. So you can put capital requirements on. I agree with those things, but they're broad rules, okay? It's not micromanaging and micro-regulation. I'm looking at the football and seeing what rules are necessary to make this game dynamic and work. Not so micromanaging it that you have to have this regulator looking over every day to figure out what's happening within that organization, because they can't do it. It's too complicated. The world is too complicated. And the converse proposition also applies. If people think there's regulation, like hedge funds are regulated, then they say, okay, the SEC is looking over what the hedge funds are doing, therefore I'm fine. But here's a case when Mr. Madoff was not a hedge fund guy. People thought he used the fact that the SEC was looking at him to sell his product. And so how can we trust A to monitor B unless we can really evaluate A? And so that's the key part of this.
Professor Scholes, thank you very much for sparing the time to talk to us.
Thank you. You're welcome. I appreciate it.